Right. Yeah. Zoom recording. Okay, so I'm not even going to ask you any questions unless you want me to.
Well, let me tell you what I've done here. Just it may not be exactly what you wanted, hopefully, but it is. And in order to avoid a freestyle type conversation with me just rambling on, I took it one step farther than just writing an outline. I actually wrote a little speech,
Wow.
little thing type of thing, just to keep me on track and so on. So I'll probably be reading most of this, ad-libbing a little here and there. As I said, I probably should have done it more in an outline type of thing, but I was wanted to keep. There are certain things I thought I wanted to mention, and so on. So anyway,
Okay.
so
I'm going to first tell you that you're being recorded,
right,
and we're going to send you a document to sign electronically saying that you agree to release this, for our purposes.
okay, that's going to come later. That's going to come now.
That's going to come later. It's
Okay, that's cool. That's cool.
we're revising it. So I just wanted to make sure we had that.
Yes.
You
So,
look great.
growth and so on. That it's. I never really had a goatee. I had a mustache before over the years, but I never really felt I could grow one. But it seems to be holding up on its own. So
Very au courant.
very extinguished or distinguished. I'm sorry, whatever the word is.
Okay. Um,
So okay, so go ahead and
I'm going to put myself on mute so you can't hear the background noise here. But
okay.
if you need me or want to pause or anything, just let me know and I'll unmute myself.
Well, I would also like to suggest if there's something that you feel I didn't get to in terms of what I was talking about and have a question, I have no problem with you jumping in and asking a question on it or whatever.
Okay.
So hopefully this thing comes out to be somewhere in the neighborhood of a half an hour, but we shall see.
Okay. I've got time.
Okay.
Okay, let me mute myself. And this is John McAvoy.
Well, hello. My name is John McAvoy. I've been a Piermont business and resident for the last 45 years. A bit of a disclaimer, I sat down and wrote a bunch of notes, and I have them here to refer myself to, and also it's almost at reading at times. I'm going to be reading it. So just so I made sure I covered most of the things that I felt were relevant. In particular, one of the reasons how I came to Piermont, I am a Rockland County resident, born and raised. My first home was a place called Shanks Village, which some of you might know about, some of you might not. Particularly historical people, you should know. I'm going to show you a little picture of this book put out by the Rockland County Historical Society, Camp Shanks and Shanks Village. It was converted after the World War II into student housing for married students and couples. What they did was they took these long 150-foot barracks and cut them into thirds and made apartments out of them. And that was my first home. That place was located almost where exit 6 is on the PIP, somewhere in that area. They obviously tore it down. My parents, being residents of Camp Shanks, they got to know a lot of people, a lot of friends. People used to commute by bus to Columbia University and so on. They got together with 32 other families and started a cooperative community in Tappan called Hickory Hill. It was kind of a unique community where say we wanted to have a baseball game, you'd call the first house in the block and declare it, this is a chain phone call, and the person was required to call the next house with your message, almost like we used to do in kindergarten, I guess. Hopefully the message got through properly. For instance, say there's going to be a ball game at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock down on the field. Let's everyone meet there. And sure enough, at a certain point, people would all meet there and so on. So it was a unique time, a cooperative time, something that was very unique in growing up, which then takes me to 1961 when I was in Little League. And the season was over. I was not selected for the All-Star team. I don't know why, but the catcher got sick when they had a game to play, and they called me up. They reactivated my contract with the Little League, and I came out to play in this little village called Piermont. We were playing against their All-Star team, and it was at a home game for Piermont. So we showed up at the field. And at that time, the field was right next to the dump. And there were certain odors coming from there and so on. And it was certainly a different ball field than we were used to in Tappan. Let's see. I wasn't really aware of what Piermont was about, but it was an interesting game. I don't remember if we won or lost. I do know that being the catcher, I was the closest person to the bleachers and the fan base, and most of the people were there from Piermont to see the game. They were very supportive of their team. And I heard things said to me that I had never heard said before at a baseball game, things about my mother, about where I grew up and so on like that. Most were all not true. They weren't about my mother, but they said it. And I said, you know, hey, if we did that in Tappan, we would have been benched and been in trouble and everything else. And it wasn't just the kids, it was the parents too. I mean, this Piermont, my first introduction was this rough and tumble factory mill town with a dirty baseball field, but a bunch of loyal fans that showed up to support the team. Then in my family, we moved out of the area for a year out to Ohio. Things didn't work out too well there. So we ended up coming back and lived in Nyack and Upper Nyack, Valley Cottage, South Nyack for a while, then moved back to Tappan. And at Tappan Z High School, I got to know a lot of the Piermont kids. And for some reason, they were called river rats. And you never knew what they're going to say or what kind of trouble you're going to get in with them. So I used to take the bus from Tappan to Nyack, never stopping in Piermont because, again, it was a pretty rough and tumble town. Then in 1969, I went to college. It was strange how I got there. It was at the height of the Vietnam War, and I was trying to stay out of the war. And but I was having a trouble getting into a four-year college in New York. And this is pre-days of the computer. We used to have these big fat college books. You'd open up and look at your colleges and send an application off and the requirements and so on. Well, I was applying to New York State colleges out of economic necessity and so on. And one day, just before I got to New York, I got to New Mexico. I read the requirements and the fees and money and everything else. It sounded perfect, and I sent an application off. They accepted me sight unseen, and off I went. Unbeknownst to me, it became a safety school, and I looked around at the college, and there were a bunch of my friends from high school there, out in New Mexico. Anyway, did the four-year program there, graduated, actually circled the globe once afterwards, ended up living in Bangkok. I was in Singapore when Nixon resigned. People said to me, well, why did he resign? And I said, well, he broke the Constitution. He, did these things. And they said, yeah, but wasn't he just trying to stay in power? And it sort of, it made me realize really what America really was about. And well, I think the saying used to be, it's a terrible democracy, but it's the best one that the world has. So let's stay with it. And so I really learned a whole lot about that. I came back, and in 1976, my older sister Diane was involved with a group up in Nyack called Women's Way, and she wanted to do a coffee house. And she did all this research and came back to the board of Women's Way, and they ended up saying, not yet. I don't think we have the energy or time to do it. Well, my sister is someone you can't say no to. And so she came to me, which I wasn't doing a whole lot. I think I was working at the Fat Cat in Tappan, right on the corner there across from the library. And she told me this idea that she wanted to do a little coffee house and have music and poetry reading and chess games and so on. And she said she had done all this research and she had found a really cheap place. And she told me down in Piermont. And I was like, oh, I don't think so. But talked me into going to look at it. And sure enough, we walked down, drove over to Piermont. And there was this old building at 506 Piermont Avenue, which for you that are around now, it did used to house Xavier's and still houses the wine bar, the Freelance. It was in that building. And on one side was Dave's Bar. And on the other side was a empty spot with all sorts of junk and a pizza oven and just crazy things. And it was the only thing we could afford. So we went ahead and took it, even with all my forbiddings about Piermont and what it was about at the time. Again, it was a factory mill town. Sorry, on to the next page. So we ended up renting it and did a lot of work. It was right there on Piermont Avenue. What I'm about to say might sound a little bit politically incorrect, but just to give you an idea what Piermont was like. Everybody had a nickname on Main Street, whether it was Shoo Shoo Harry or Coal Can, or in our case, our landlord was Dave the Jew. Totally incorrect, but that's what he was called. And he ran Dave's Bar, and all the factory workers at the end of their shifts would come in and have a drink or whatever. And the shifts sometimes ended at 8 o'clock in the morning. And that's when Dave opened at 8 o'clock. And he wasn't the only bar in town. There were 4 or 5 other bars right on the street there. There was Mom Raggia's, and there was the Cracker Box down the street. And then there was the Piermont Pub, and of course, Dave's. And all the people used to come in after work and hang out and so on. Dave's, there was a card table, a bar, and a pool table. And, money passed over all of them. They laughed at us for thinking that we could make something in Piermont because it was, again, a rough and tumble Piermont factory town. What was interesting, they accepted us. They would come over. We were spackling. The guys that knew how to spackle would say, "Oh, you're doing that wrong," and take a hold of the spackle and go ahead and do it. Or when we were hanging the sheetrock, they would help hang the sheetrock. Leroy Lynch would go ahead and loan me his dump truck to go ahead and take things off the dump. I mean, literally, he let me have, "Oh, John, you want a dump truck? Go and take it." Didn't say, "Can you drive it?" or anything like that. You just take it, It was a community, and it was sort of like something that we had felt before growing up. And in fact, Dave had said to us, "John, don't pay me any rent until you open." He was just happy getting the place fixed up and looking nice and all the junk cleared out and so on. So literally, until the day we opened, we did not have to pay any rent, which was a great help to us. Piermont Avenue, where we always called Main Street. There was quite a community. Whenever the fire whistle went off, you would see open all the doors on Main Street there, and from the factory and from the bars or whatever else, the doors would all open and people would run down the street to the fire department to answer the call, whether it was a fire, a medical emergency, or a water rescue. Things came to a stop and everything headed down to the firehouse. The factory, which is gone now, but it was a pretty amazing structure. You can still see parts of it in the movie Purple Rose of Cairo, which we'll talk about later. The factory had all sorts of things going on in it. They collected paper, they recycled it, and every 15 years or so, it seemed like there would be a fire there. And again, everyone would show up. Piermont still, in times that we were opened up, was a rough and tumble town. Down where the turning point that is now, 468, was a place called the Piermont Pub. And there was 4 different groups that used to hang out there. The townies, meaning local kids that lived in town. There were the brothers, the bikers, and then the kids from New Jersey. The kids from New Jersey would come up because the drinking age was still 18 in New York, and in New Jersey it was 21. And you get an older crowd coming up because the bars closed at 2 o'clock in New Jersey, and it didn't close till 4 o'clock in New York. So Piermont Pub and a lot of the bars, being on the border town as we are, all the people used to come up. And between those 4 groups at the Piermont Pub, there would always be a potential for some sort of fight going on. And Piermont at the time only had 1 policeman on duty at a time, and that was it. And when he would get the call that there was a fight going on at the Piermont Pub, he would call Orangetown for backup. But they wouldn't show up. They'd pull around behind Kurt's gas station. I call it Kurt's Otto's, call it Otto's gas station. They'd pull behind there and wait. And Piermont would go in to try to see what was going on with his radio finger, ready to go in and call for help. And most of the time he did have to call for help. And again, Piermont was a rough and tumble town. There's several tragic events that happened during my time in Piermont. The first one, when the turning point was across the street at 506, there was a fire, and a local family, the Hancocks, lost 3 of their children in it. And there's actually now just recently put together by, I think, Al Bartley and a bunch of other people, a statue of 3 young children right in the center of town where they built that little park with the chess tables and so on, between the bank and the Otto's gas station. There's a statue there. There was a crazy suicide murder up at the castle. And because we really don't know what happened, it started out as a suicide attempt and then turned into a murder. And while whatever's being murdered, the other person murdered the other one trying to save their life. So it's a crazy time. And lastly, one of our more famous residents had just moved into Piermont. And right next door to him, there was a murder. And the guy disappeared. And he was gone for 3 days. And some people said, oh, it was off to Canada. Other people said, oh, he's here or there. He was actually, and I don't know where the name came from, but I'm sure some of the other old timers can tell you, the Cowboy Fields, which is located right in back of the old elementary school in the back of Piermont Place. He was hiding in the Cowboy Fields for 3 days. And then he finally came out. They caught him. And they had to go ahead and cancel, I think right around Halloween, they canceled Halloween because of him being out in the fields, and they were worried about him. So that's just a few things. You know, again, the tragedy over the years being so close to the Hudson River, we always had that great underwater rescue team. Anyway, so we outgrew our location rather rapidly, and we started looking around, and with some help of some neighbors and friends, we ended up buying the building at 468, again, with the one which housed the Piermont Pub. Over the years, it was called many, many different things. It's Ding Dongs, the Lower Deck, the Dugout, the Mayos. It used to be a hotel, actually, when it was first built around 1835 for the railroad. And in actuality, there are 12 fireplaces in the building, none of which are actually operational at this time. But one of the fireplaces actually has the old hanger in it that you put a pot of soup on and swing it into the fire, and it would go ahead and heat up. That's sort of hidden in the back that most people don't get a chance to see at all. We opened upstairs in 1981. I really couldn't get downstairs organized too well. We had closed the Piermont Pub down a couple of years before that. And so we ended up opening upstairs both as a restaurant and a music room after dinner. Still local musicians all playing and so on. Then one night in 1984, the Clearwater was in town doing their annual pumpkin sale. And, excuse me. And Pete Seeger was on board, and one of the crew came to us and asked us, said, look, we know you have music here, and we know it's a Tuesday night, but we've been on this boat for too long, and they'd love to come over and do something. So they came over and had an old-fashioned hootenanny. And there was Pete Seeger standing right there in the middle of my restaurant, singing along with everybody and having a great old time. And there happened to be a booking agent that had volunteered, and he said, oh, this is a place I can put some musicians. And sure enough, he ended up calling me up, and we booked Eric Anderson, and I had never paid that much money before for an artist, but the show went successful. So after that, we booked another show with Odetta, and then Ramblin' Jack Elliott, just to name a few. And things started getting more and more busy that way with the live shows and so on. It did get in the way of the restaurant a little bit at times, but we survived. In 1987, we had a late night electrical fire that took us out of business for probably 4 weeks upstairs, and 4 weeks downstairs and 8 weeks upstairs. We did finally open the downstairs in 1985. Over the years, we used to do so many shows. I've cut back a little bit now, but we used to do 300 shows a year. Now we're down to about 110, and it's a little easier. We actually had one in 1 month in 1991. We had just 1 month over 35 shows scheduled. And then some nights were duplicates, should do 2 shows one nights and so on. But every night there was music. So, it was time to slow down, and we've cut back, as I said, in 2017. In 2009, I got a little bit tired of the restaurant business, the number of family events and weddings and so on that I missed having to be at work. Just took its toll, and it was just time to back off. So in 2009, I rented the upstairs restaurant to Tequila Sol Limon, a Mexican restaurant that was being run by one of my bartenders, Stephen Connolly, downstairs, and a couple of other fellows that had a restaurant in Suffern. And it was a big relief. It was a lot of weight off my shoulders, and I'm much happier now about it. And we're still doing a lot of great shows. And in fact, I pride myself on saying that we've had over 48 members of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame have played at our club here in Piermont. I mean, I'd have people walk up to me and say, whose bus is that? And I said, well, that's Chris Christopherson's. Or whose bus is that? That's Bill Monroe's, Ralph Stanley, Arlo Guthrie, just to name a few. And it was a lot of fun, a lot of honor. And in fact, this year, we sort of things slowed down a little bit because I guess our musician and fan base are getting a little older. We do have one musician that's up this year for Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We're wishing him luck. He, if you can imagine, he's played with us many a time, but never as the New York Dolls. David Johansen, he's come in and played as Harry Smith or David Johansen. He also has come in as Buster Poindexter. He's got the chameleon. He's done so many different things. But again, he's up for enter into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with the New York Dolls. I wish him luck, because that'll give us one more, 49, want to hit the 50. But we would get calls from booking agents about playing at the Turning Point, and when I told them when they were, oh, you're too close to New York City, you can't play. It's too much of competition and so on. I would say, well, just ask the bands, ask the clubs in New York how they feel. And sure enough, he would ask, and the club down in the city, maybe the Bottom Line or the Lone Star, they'd say, oh, the Turning Point, that's upstate, right? And they would go, okay, yeah, no, they can, it's not in competition, they can play there. And then the musicians would show up and they would look at me and say, we're 15 minutes from New York City. How did that happen? And I would explain to them that, it's amazing. We're like in a little country area that's surrounded by state land that is just absolutely gorgeous. And you can literally be on the George Washington Bridge in 15 minutes. So it was all pretty amazing that way. Over the last 40 years, I've lived probably up on the hill on Main Street. And at one point I had a house down on Bogertown. For you old people, for you new people that don't know where Bogertown is, that's the very end of Paradise, just before you get to swing toward the pier. There's a little section that's got 10 or 12 houses on it. And where the name came from, again, that's another history question, Bogertown. It's there, used to be, I think, one of the ferry people that ran the ferry from Piermont to Dobbs Ferry was involved with it. But so, as I said, right now I'm living on Valentine Avenue, and it's kind of strange. I am in Piermont, but everyone thinks I'm in Spark Hill because we're right next to Spark Hill, and we don't. It seems a little strange, but I assure you, I'm a Piermont resident, and I have a tax bill to prove it. So that part of it. Some of my favorite things that's happened in Piermont over the years. For 7 years, I lived right above Buttercups and backed up against the parking lot there. And that's where the fire whistle was. And when we finally had a baby for 6 months, the dog would howl and baby would scream every time the fire whistle went off. And it went off regularly. But one of the fun things was the Piermont Fire Carnival was located right there in that parking lot. So I could go downstairs and sit on my little manicured patio on the side of the building there and lean over the fence and order a dozen shuck-shelled clams or a sausage and pepper hero or beer or something like that. They would offer to throw my dog on the broiler because she was sitting there barking at him. But it was on right there next to us for 7 years. It was a great experience. And the Fireman's Carnival, it's sad that it's gone, but I understand it was an enormous effort these guys put together to make this happen. And they also brought in a whole bunch of carnies to go ahead and do the rides and so on. And they manned the cooking, the fire department manned the cooking facilities and the games of chance and so on. And for years on years on years, it went on. And in fact, that was one of the few times I ever came to Piermont growing up, was for this carnival, because on the 4th of July, they had fireworks too. And literally cars were parked up on 9W for these fireworks. There were just thousands of people in town. Today, no one would tolerate it. It would have been impossible. But, I understand why they had to stop it, but it was one of those fun things that did occur from time to time in town. Another interesting thing about Piermont and the parades, there were always parades happening. You never knew what was going to be happening down the street one way or the other. At Halloween, there was a parade for the kids coming out of the community play group, which was a day school, a preschool for kids, affordable pay scale for people who could afford the whole thing to get scholarships and so on. They would have an early morning parade for them, and then in the evening they have a parade for the older kids. The concept is, hey, let's give them something to do, give them the haunted house, so that there's something for the kids to do and not get into trouble. And there was also a Memorial Day parade. There's a parade whenever Santa Claus came to town. And then we used to be able to sit on the porch at the Turning Point and like our own private little viewing stand, watch the parades go by. Piermont became a little place where a lot of movie people came. As I mentioned, Woody Allen, they had said to him, oh, we found a couple of towns, one Newburgh, it's great, and Piermont is great, old stuff and so on. And he liked Newburgh better, but when they talked about getting him up there, They said, well, the quickest way would be a helicopter. I believe he said no, at which point Piermont was selected for the Purple Rose. And it really documented a lot of a time period in Piermont that was unique, and that was the factory was still here. Where the sidewalk bistro is right now, the old building was still complete inside. It had been allowed to deteriorate to the point of being almost condemned. But there was still on the left-hand side a full working, potentially working ice cream parlor with a marble countertop with tables and booths and so on. And they actually went in and dressed that up and fixed it up and made it part of the movie. So if you see the Purple Rose Cairo, you'll see Mia Farrow working as a waitress in the old diner, not the diner or ice cream parlor, or whatever you want to call it, that was there. Every time they seemed to shoot, we always ended up on the cutting room floor. The turning point, I don't know what it was, the low ceilings downstairs or upstairs or whatever, but we never really made it into the movies. Woody Allen never turned to us. They were never going around hiring everybody. I turned down the money. I said, well, just leave my sign up. I said, well, we can't leave the sign up. But they ended up turning me into the Salvation Army. And they put on, he is your turning point. And I was thinking, oh, that's going to be in the movie and everything else. But they never turned the camera our direction, except for at the very, very end, they caught our stares. And that was it. We were on the cutting room floor there. And then Jim Henson actually came to town once when he was having trouble starting this movie called The Labyrinth. And he couldn't quite figure it out. And they finally wrote a new beginning for it, at which they filmed some scenes up in Nyack of this young lady talking Old English, and then all of a sudden looking at her watch and realizing that she's late, and all of a sudden you realize it's modern time, and she goes running with her dog this way and that way. And toward the very final end, she runs up the Turning Point driveway. So, but again, no signs or anything that you could see. In 77, when we were down at the old place at 506, we got a call from Barbara Walters' people. They were doing an interview with Baryshnikov, who was a neighbor down the street in Steen's Landing. And they had just done a movie, him and Anne Bancroft, called The Turning Point. And they wanted to know, well, did you name the movie after him? And at which point I had to say, no, I'm sorry. If I did, I guess they might have actually done part of the interview there, but I wasn't going to lie. We actually got the name from a album done by a English blues artist by the name of John Mayall, who actually has appeared at the Turning Point many times. So that was fun. One of the things I always have to give is give directions to Piermont, because Piermont people didn't know how to get here. And so I'd come down 9W, then turn left on Ash, go down this steep hill, come to the stop sign, you take a 180-degree turn to the right, then you come down the hill again. At the bottom of the hill, you turn right. And we're the second tree on the right. And people would ask, oh, because if you're at the turning there, is that the turning point or whatever? And no. But I also used to advertise it as a town that time forgot. Because literally, when you made that turn onto Ash, at the top of Ash, coming down the hill, you literally, with the factory still there, and Kurt's Auto's gas station going on, and you turn onto Main Street, Piermont Avenue, it hadn't changed. There were still a lot of old buildings, still a lot of that feeling that was there. And people literally felt they discovered something. It was, it's just amazing. It's a little different now with the landing being out there and so on like that, looking a little more modern, but we still have a good selection of old things running around. What do I miss in Piermont, and what is gone? I miss the look of old Piermont, the factory, the dirt, the people of Piermont, the old marble counter I mentioned at the sidewalk. As you navigated down Ash Street, you made that turn. When I first came to town, there were actually 5 pool tables in town, and now there are none. Again, the idea of a pool table, you know, River City, and there's trouble right here in River City, stands with pool. Well, we had 5 pool tables in town. The first 4 were very obvious ones. They were the Cracker Box, Mom Maraglia's, the Piermont Pub, and Dave's Bar. But the 5th one was hidden away up on 9W in a little place called The Comeback. Now, it sounds like a cute name until you realize it was a gay bar. And, but it was a great pool table, and people used to, when we got off of work at the Turning Point, we'd pile in the car, and if it felt like a game of pool, we'd go up to the Comeback and put a quarter down on the machine and play a game of pool. And all were welcomed. It was, again, a welcoming life in Piermont. The Comeback actually became a restaurant after that, Toro Loco, I guess, and now it's the convenience store up on 9W there. But it was a unique thing. As I mentioned before, everyone seemed to have nicknames and so on when we first came to town. One of the most famous non-people in Piermont was a dog named Amos. Amos lived down at John Marchese's garage. He was a trucker who used to take paper out of the factory. Probably on our little main street, there was probably 10 or 12 semis a day going in and out of the factory, blowing diesel smoke and everything else. Well, Amos was his dog, and he lived at his office there. But Amos was very industrious, and he realized that he could get lunches wherever he hung out if he worked at it. So he used to hang out at the gas station also. And sometimes he would get locked in at night because he was there and they didn't realize he was hiding somewhere or whatever else. And Amos would go ahead and go in the garbage, get out the lunch, or make a mess. But everyone loved Amos, and they started, they put a bed out for him at the gas station. And now Amos had 2 homes where he could go get lunch and so on, take a nap, maybe sleep out of the cold. But that food service didn't suffice him. So he used to have every morning, very early in the morning, he'd make his rounds. He'd go to each restaurant in town and find their bread bag and take out 1 baguette, just one. He wouldn't take out a whole bunch, but he would take out 1 baguette and go put it in a little safe spot where he would come back later and go to town and get another one. Sally Savage was up early one day and caught this happening. And she made this photo, which I wanted to share with you, of Amos walking down the street, down by the Cracker Box, down there with one of his baguettes. And he'd go later on, after that, go pick them up in that one place we hid them, sit down, have a long snack, take a nap, and go on his rounds again. One of the places he loved to do too, because he knew that there was food available at Tallman State Park with diners and picnickers and so on. He'd go there. He also loved to go through the marsh. And this is where he got his nickname, Mudflap, because he used to go into the marsh. And if anyone's had a dog going to that marsh, it is muddy and it sticks. And he was a long-haired dog, and he'd come out just covered in mud. And some people would say, "Oh, he looks like a mudflap," and he'd do that all the time. And that's where he got his name, Mudflap. There was a history that happens down at the Dutch Reformed Church that they don't keep their steeple light on all the time. But if someone you loved dies or passes, you can go down to the church, and for a small donation, they'll leave the light on overnight in the steeple in memory of that person. Now, Reverend John has not told me who did it, but the day that Amos died, that light was on all night, and someone had paid for it. So it was one of the characters in town, Mudflaps. I think the thing I miss most, though, and again, a lot of people don't realize it, but right in front of what is now 14 and Hudson, it used to be Monterey Agnes, there was actually train tracks that up until the late 80s were used by a train. And it would come down from Spark Hill or Orangeburg, backing down. And there was a leg that, people know about the train path going up by the by the train station. But it also went down parallel to South Main Street, literally so close to the houses that are there that I was told by one girl that her mother used to hand the engineer cups of coffee as he went by out of her kitchen window. And they'd be backing this train down and it'd come into the center of Piermont. And this is where I like to call it the train dance began, because it took about half an hour, 45 minutes to do it. And there was no train crossings there. There was no, gates or flagmen or anything like that. They would just back down. And as soon as they went across Piermont Avenue, it would split into two legs, one leg going to the left, down behind the community market and Otto's, and the other leg going to the right, heading out toward the river. The train would pull in and head off to the right leg and drop off the caboose. Then it would pull back out, crossing Main Street, tying up traffic and so on, and then back up again and go down the left leg. And once it got down to the end of the left leg, it picked up two full cars full of paper products and so on that had been completed. And it would pull back out, crossing Main Street, tying up traffic and spewing smoke and so on every time the engine revved up to start up again. And then it would go back down the right leg and drop off to two full cars with the caboose. Then it would pull back out, go down the left leg again and drop off the two empty cars they had brought in. Pull back out. Now it was just the engine pulling across Piermont Avenue, spewing smoke, people stopping. All this happening at 2 miles an hour, maybe 1 mile an hour, very slow. It would pull back down the right leg, pick up the two full cars, the caboose, and leave town. And the whole process might take half an hour, might take 40 minutes. You never know. And this happened more than once a week. And again, with the diesel engine, with all the trucks that came through town at the time, it was hard to keep a white porch white, all the soot and so on. But it was still fun watching all that happen. And a number of years, they actually took out the crossing there. I think there's still one piece of track that they still have sitting over there that people can see. Let's see, where am I here? Okay, and one would go through that. And so the train was an important part of Piermont at that time. We've had all sorts of political intrigues happen. We've had, I can remember one time our judge got arrested in Orangetown. He had an office over on 303, and he came out and saw a bunch of wild turkeys on 303. And out of concern for their safety, not getting run over, he pulled out his pistol and started firing in the air to scare the turkeys off the road. It didn't help that there was a guy, Verizon guy, in the telephone pole a couple of blocks down. He got a little worried and called the police. And the judge got arrested, but I think he got released on his own, whatever. There was also a time where the police department raided the fire department for gambling machines, little slot machines or something, or whatever they were doing. There's always some sort of back and forth going on with politics and whatever. You didn't necessarily have to be a Democrat to get on the board, but you had to be supported by Democrats to get on the board, because Piermont had always been a blue collar Democratic town. And, politically, it's always been that way, though it's a little more democratic nowadays about who gets elected and so on. We've had conservative mayors, we've had all sorts of different people, and the village has held its own. People every once in a while come up with the plan about, let's get rid of the police department. We don't need them here. I've always felt we had to have them. It was important to be able to know who was walking the streets of Piermont, who was there, and so on. If Orangetown took over, I don't think we'd ever see a policeman down here except driving through in his car. Down here, you can get to know the police and they know you. And it's, again, a community. Right now, we are going through this whole COVID-19 lifestyle. It started back in beginning of 2020. We closed the Turning Point on March 10th, and we've been closed ever since, today being February 21, I guess. Forgive me if I got that wrong. But I've been closed as a music hall since then, and I probably won't get opened again for another 6 months at least. I've been telling people probably late summer, early fall. And I don't mind, because we're taking care of our neighbors. We're making sure people aren't getting sick, aren't broadcasting the flu around. And this will pass and we'll get reopened again. I mean, this is the first time that I've been closed for this long ever, even from when we had the fire. It's been almost a year now, and we've lost several restaurants due to it already. The Wine Bar is gone, and Olar, I believe, has left town, and one or two other things. But I'm not planning to leave. I'm planning to stick around for a while longer, and I still have more shows I want to do and present here, and this great little town that, as I said, at times seemed to have forgotten. Now they remember, neighbors know us, and so on. So I've been very happy with it, and happy with my time here, and I'm not planning on going anywhere soon. So thank you for hearing my story. I don't know if you have any questions, Barbara.
I'm going to unmute myself.
You are? I can hear you.
That was great, John. Well, I had my finger on the space bar, so now I'm officially unmuted. And actually, Ed heard you too. He's doing a puzzle. We've gotten into doing puzzles.
Oh,
He thought
we should start trading them, because my wife has goes through a puzzle every couple of days, but it's the 5 or 6, 500 or 1,000 ones.
1,000. We're all 1,000, so we're happy
for you
to do that. What year did the train stop coming through that you were talking about?
Well, it was when the factories closed, because there was no need for the trains to come through. They had actually spent just an enormous amount of money redoing the crossing. They had modernized it with these big chunks of plastic that were supposed to make it better, which actually made it worse, because it was, I think it made it too slippery and the bicyclists would come over. It made it less of a bump because the things were tighter and this and that. So if we had to say when the factory closed, I don't remember.
Okay, I can get that date.
Yeah, but it was fun. I mean, just seeing this train just going back and forth and spewing smoke, and you really felt, you felt like you were in some past history doing something.